spirit of a place is sometimes hard to capture, difficult to define. But that's just not the case here. No matter what part of town you're in, what color or neighborhood the people come from, it's the same. And not a lot of places can say that. But this is Philadelphia, a diverse city, home to underdogs, rebels, and revolutionaries. This is my next stop on a journey that has taken me from battlefields in Iraq and Afghanistan to the NFL. My mission? To better understand the issues of NFL cities, the players and people who make up the communities, and the issues that are at the forefront. So I come with an open mind, to learn and to listen, because even though the spirit may be strong, and we may think we know this place, my job is to go deeper. It's perhaps fitting that over 200 years ago, it was here, in Philadelphia, our nation's first capital, that the words of the Constitution and Bill of Rights were argued about and ultimately decided upon. In many ways, this city's football team leads the charge for equality and social justice. Super Bowl champions tend to have a bigger megaphone, and these guys don't seem to be afraid to use it. 98 others have held the job of mayor of Philadelphia. Elected in 2016, Mayor Jim Kenney became just the second white mayor in over 30 years. And Kenney's progressive legislation hasn't come without controversy. But speaking out and standing up is Mayor Kenney's MO. Kenney openly criticized President Trump after disinviting the Eagles to the White House following their Super Bowl win, calling Trump, quote, a fragile egomaniac obsessed with crowd size and afraid of the embarrassment of throwing a party to which no one wants to attend, end quote. So I sat with Mayor Kenney to learn more about his city, its relationship with the football team, and the problems they face. How important is sports to the city of Philadelphia, and especially the Eagles?
I think the Eagles are extremely important to the city. It's the game that promotes diversity amongst the fan base. And our fan base is from the Lehigh Valley out to Reading and Lancaster, down to Delaware, southern New Jersey. So we get a pretty big fan base, and it's important. Sometimes it sets the tone for the week, either a big win or a disappointing loss. When you talk about the players themselves and especially the Eagles, I think they kind of lead the way in speaking out on these social justice issues. And players like Malcolm Jenkins and Chris Long. And in my opinion, they do it in a very effective way that communicates to everybody. What are your feelings on that stuff? I think it's terrific. I think that more pro players need to step up and use their bully pulpit to change things. Look, I'm a privileged white male. I grew up with all the privileges of being male and white. I have a responsibility to cover my heart and stand at attention. There's other people in this country who have not had that experience, and they have a right to express that disappointment and to try to change it. It takes a lot of courage to stand out there and kneel down when people are screaming at you to stand up. And I admire their courage, and I admire what they do. And I also admire not only the things they protest, but the things they stand for, in addition to criminal justice reform. But I saw Chris is trying to bring clean water to the world. They're involved in all of our playground upgrades and all of our school activities. They're just wonderful people, and they're a nice bunch of guys to be around. What in Philadelphia are you focusing on? Because I know education is a huge part of it. The only way out of poverty is education. If we don't have our kids reading at grade level by 3rd or 4th grade, by 7th and 8th grade, they practically can't read. They're embarrassed because of that lack of skill. They start acting up in class. By 9th and 10th grade, we lose them to the street. And oftentimes, that's not good stuff. That lands them in jail or lands them buried. How do you remove those obstacles, especially for people that maybe don't have those opportunities as a white male, that to ensure that education equity, what do you actually do? What does that look like? We have to raise revenue to pay for it, and we had to do it through a beverage tax, which was not popular with the Beverage Association and some of our retailers, but we want to make sure our kids know that we believe they have value. If you're a 10-year-old little boy or girl and you live in a struggling neighborhood and your school's struggling, there's no feeling of equity in your life. Who cares about you? And by the time you're 18, 20 years old, and I've lived my life like that, I'm cold. And I think that's what the Eagles players help us do, is when they're out there building libraries, when they're giving kids their time, when they're raising money on their own, when they're donating parts of their salary. I mean, those are things that show those little kids in every neighborhood of the city that they really care about them. And they're not just, high-paid athletes who don't have a heart.
It seems like a lot of these players, many of them played other places first, then they come to Philly, and this becomes a part of who they become. You think that's a reflection of the city itself?
I think the city, once the city has grown on you and the people have grown on you, I think there's a tight bond. After a while, they get us, and they want to be part of us, and we want to be part of them.
In the NFL, I think the Eagles are kind of leading the way as far as social justice. So how can Philadelphia lead the way for the rest of the country on how to do this from a city standpoint?
We have to show that paying for education is the way to go. I mean, and what happens is if you've got two sets of people, for example, in the city. People who are very poor, who don't have a choice to move, and they're stuck with the school they're stuck with. Then we have these younger people who have come, we're actually the highest millennial growing city in the country. And they love it here because it's relatively inexpensive compared to Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. And they can live cheaply and have fun, and then they want to maybe get married, meet somebody, and then they start figuring out, where are we going to move to send our kids to a good school in the suburbs? I want to keep that, those people here for 30 years and allow the really poor people to raise themselves up through education. And if you have a good education system, you don't lose your population, and poor people get better.
Since being released from prison in 2017, Wallace Peoples, or Walo 267, has spent pretty much every waking minute talking.
I'm Walo 267, and I'm reporting live from upstate New York. Listen, don't abandon your plan based off somebody else's hand. Ladies and gentlemen, you better get it together. So parents!
Talking to those who locked him up, those who are locked up, and those who are headed down a potentially similar path.
Because you can do anything you want to do. You can go anywhere you want to go. You can be anything you want to be. But you know what? You got to put the work in order to do that. And it's just like that.
Using Instagram as his main source of communicating his message, he's become an advocate for justice reform. And so fitting, our next stop is here, Eastern State Penitentiary, the oldest in the country.
Welcome to the life of Walo. I'm Walo 267. I will never stop.
When you're locked up, you can't help but think of numbers, the time wasting away, and opportunities passing by. And now that he's on the other side, two sets of numbers serve as motivation.
267 came from my prison number. My prison number was DG 2670. And just so happened that 267 is the area code of Philly too also. When I left prison, I held on to 267 because I wanted to, remember where I came from.
Right.
Where I'm going and where I ain't never going back to.
So what's 2048?
2048 that's the maximum date of my parole. I get off parole October 29th, 2048. I earned this sentence of 19 and a half to 52 years for 2 armed robberies and 2 firearm violations.
You said earn the sentence.
Yeah, you earned it. You don't just get it out of, it don't just come to you. You got to do something.
I would never stop spreading my energy. I would never stop sharing my story so these kids in the inner cities of America can learn from my story and don't live my story.
As Walo pushes his message, the system seems to be changing. Since 2016, Philadelphia has taken a hard look at justice reform. Early bail reviews and directing drug offenders to treatment facilities has caused a 33% drop in prison population. But Walo continues to push his message to those he directly affects.
You can't go in a rehab, or you can't go to a halfway house and talk to these guys, but I can. I go out here into these streets of Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, and I talk to the young kids that's out there operating outside of the law. I'm able to talk to them because not only did I lived it, but I speak the language and now, and I wear the uniform and now. I can't go down there with no suit on.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can't, when they see me, they're like, whoa, he look like us. Who is delivering the message? That's important out here. And what uniform is they wearing? Can I identify with them? Is they relatable to me?
So when it comes to that uniform that you talk about, you see
the players in the football uniform, the Eagles uniform, and what they're standing up for. You know, there's a lot of guys on that team that are all about this change, you know, this reform. What does that mean to you, and do you think that they're going about that the right way?
The only issue that I might have with it is that they're not, most of the time, connected to the people that's on the ground doing something and the people that really been affected by this. Sometimes they're connected to the fluff. The people that just want to have the dinners and talk about the issue and, oh yeah, you know, because it's popular to talk about justice reform. That's the new it thing. Right. That's the new cool thing. Let's have a dinner. Let's have a plate dinner. Let's raise some money. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. But why the people that was affected by this is not in the room? They're not a part of the conversation.
I think a lot of those guys do want to do that, but maybe they don't know how. You know what I mean? And you get your PR people and all this, and it's like this is how you connect to the community, you know. But they want you to connect with people maybe in high places and all that, which is important too.
For publicity reasons, and then now their whole mission is now diluted and watered down, and now it's not even nothing.
Say I was one of these players that are you know, standing up for justice reform. What would you say to me? Like, what is the best way that I can help? How can I really connect?
Get down with the people at the bottom. I believe they just got to get out there, connect with the halfway houses, and get a look for themselves, for the struggle that people is going through. See how they can create things that can help, or see how their words and their connections and their influence can change the conditions. It's them little things. It ain't always about this. You know, you always say people do stuff they supposed to. A lot of people don't have to. Because once they get their money in their mansion and their foreign cars, they can just say,
they can do nothing.
They can say F everybody. But their presence is so powerful. Not just amongst the people in the community, but the people that's making the decisions, that's to create change. They're big football fans too. Yeah. The people that's doing the legislation is up there with the bills.
Well, we got it, like you said, we have to listen to the people that have been there, and not try to. I'm not trying to, you know, to push you in a direction or tell you what the narrative is. You know what the narrative is, and you know how to change it.
This is justice reform, where you're able to have this dialogue, because there's some people that's in some powerful position that's going to be enlightened of the struggle that these people is going through, that's incarcerated, that's coming up from the ghetto, and they're going to make a difference. And there's somebody that's in college right now, a life changer, somebody that's going to dictate policy tomorrow, that's going to see this, and it's going to affect them. And they're going to have a better understanding of why they should make the decisions they're going to make when they get in position later on in life. Teamwork make the dream work. And team, to me, mean together, each achieve more. You see what I'm saying? And
it's a very football thing.
Yeah, and right now we teammates, and we trying to, you know, in this dialogue, we gonna go to the championship and we gonna win. Yeah. You know, just like the Eagles did.
It's becoming clear that there's something special about the relationship between this city and its players. And a stop at a brewery is another example. With ales like Brawler and Rival, Yards Brewing Company is very much a Philadelphia original.
So you got the mash going right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's all the grain and that foam and everything. It's all starches are getting converted into sugars.
Looks like a horse feed right now.
Yeah, it is. So this is like our quality area where we clean the beer up, filtering, carbonating, making sure it's like perfect to be put in the bottle.
Former Eagles linebacker Connor Barwin spent just 4 seasons with the Eagles from 2013 to 16. Now with the rival Giants, Barwin's impact is still felt. The brewery teamed with Barwin to create Make the World Better beer, with portions of the proceeds benefiting local community initiatives. In case you were wondering, it's a well-balanced Pearl-style ale, brewed with rye malt and oranges.
So we have this motto at Yards, brew unto others. And that means a bunch of different things to us. A, it's making good quality beer, but it's also about giving back, giving to the community. That's why pairing with the Make the World Better Foundation was such an obvious thing for us to do. We're fixing up playgrounds, we're having great things, and the brewery. Beer, bringing people together, it's a win-win.
My journey continues here, Rosewood Bar, to meet with Vince Papali, maybe the most Philly of all Eagles to ever wear the uniform. The former bartender and lifelong fan, who at 30 years old tried out for and made his beloved Eagles, and became the subject of the 2006 film Invincible, seems like a fitting host to better understand a bit more about the culture of this place.
Hey, salute.
Philly, Philly.
Oh, I love it. Welcome to Philadelphia, Nate. Good to have you here.
It's the underdog team, and you're the ultimate underdog story as far as I'm concerned.
And Philadelphia is the ultimate underdog town. This is grit town.
Where do you think that grit comes from? Is it the diversity of the
hard
town?
work, diversity of the town, hard work, respect. Yeah, you know, just the way the city was when it was brought up, you know, the underdog mentality, that you just had to work a little bit harder than everybody else, and nobody felt sorry for themselves and said, oh, woe is me. You know, look at the other guy. You just picked it up and you went and you did it. That's what you did.
In this day and age with the division going on in our country, like, how frustrating is that for you?
Oh, it was very frustrating for me. And you want to use sports as a diversion. You know, you want to go to a game. You don't want to see a demonstration outside, inside. You just want to go there because you want to root for your team. The fact that they used the NFL as the platform was a poor choice on their part. And again, not getting into the fact that, hey, I have a beef about something, just, you know, take it outside the game, because the people who are paying and are coming up with a coin for these players to get these $1 million salaries, we're getting pissed off. And they just want to go to the game and see the game for what it is.
I think to be fair, a lot of those players that didn't get the voice or the microphone that probably should have, I felt like it was sort of hijacked into this, just about the protest itself, the gesture itself.
You're absolutely
right. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And we didn't get to hear
right.
about the message.
Yeah, you're right.
And that was more frustrating to me than the protests at all.
Now the discussion is coming out. Right. You know, I know from the Philadelphia, Malcolm and Chris had gone down to Washington and had talked about it, and they're very involved, and God bless them, because they're making a difference. It's like, you know, when you're a husband and wife are married for 25 years. I mean, it's not always blissful. In the end, we might not always agree, but in the end, because we discuss it, we find that common ground. And we can live with it, and it's called compromise.
An athlete in general, a professional athlete, you know, do you have that responsibility?
Absolutely.
Not only be a good person, but if you feel strongly about something, you know, to do something about it off the field, to be about that.
I agree. I think that, and it's a great platform to do that. I feel very strongly about going and getting tested and screening for cancer, because I'm a 17-year cancer survivor.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, salute, baby.
You are invincible.
Yeah,
Jeez.
no, I don't know. You know, I have a message to impart. My message is the dream's out there. You can do it. Be respectful. I'm a patriot all the way. I believe in the flag. I believe in the national anthem. So you can read into that all you want. But I believe in treating people nice and treating people with respect. And Dick Vermeil told me, and I know it's a Florence Nightingale thing, that treat everybody you meet as if they're the most important person you'll ever meet. And I think if we go to that philosophy right now, our world's going to be a much better place to live in, Nate, a much better place.
As I get to know what Vince Papale calls Grit Town, I made my way to West Philadelphia. Yeah, born and raised, to visit the Speed Boys of West Philadelphia High School, a team of coaches and players who all embody the fighting spirit and underdog resolve of this place. A team that uses football to help pave the way for a brighter future and instill lessons that will last a lifetime.
What is a speed boy?
I would say it's blue collar, you know, toughness, the guy you want in the trenches with you.
Make it a good one, boys. Make it a good one.
So maybe that's why they're here, practicing for a game that won't happen. Their season cut short after a fight amongst spectators broke out in the stands after a game. Yet they're still here. They showed up to put in the work. There's pretty much nothing more Philly than that.
Give me 1, 2, 3. Take a knee. Gentlemen, I am very proud of y'all. Our season ended 3 weeks ago, but you're still here, and I appreciate it. That shows that we're doing something right here. My joy is giving back to the kids that never have a chance to go anywhere.
These kids, they gotta trust you. And I think the love and just showing them that there is an out, or there is a means out, or you can, you know, turn this around and make something of yourself from it.
If nobody told you today, let me be the first to tell you, dudes, I love you. How many people during your lifetime, other than your wife and your kids, say I love you?
Yeah, it's not common.
It's not common.
Yeah. It's important, though.
It's important that they understand that somebody other than their parents love them.
Football will expose everything messed up about you. And then we fix it as coaches for the team, for a game. But the bigger picture is life. You know, mentoring and trying to teach these young guys how to move through life. Let's break it down one time for the one time, man.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
My last stop is to visit a friend. A friend who happens to be a now 2-time Super Bowl champ and Walter Payton Man of the Year. A friend who seems equally as engaged in action to bring clean water to Tanzania and education reform to the U.S. as he is sacking quarterbacks. So it wasn't a shock to catch Chris Long giving back. Tonight, it was for his Clean Water Initiative. And after 8 years in St. Louis, a pit stop in Boston, Chris has found a home in Philadelphia.
Your parents went to school here. That's where they met, right? They met at Nova?
They met at Villanova.
Your dad's from Massachusetts, so you go up there.
Stopped in Boston.
You stopped in Boston, win a quick Super Bowl, and then you come here, do it again. I mean, how cool is that? Had you been to Philly much before that? Did you know much about the town?
Philly's special, man. I had always had a respect for Philly as a sports city, and I say this, and I don't say this lightly, my favorite thing about playing for the Philadelphia Eagles is playing in Philadelphia. Philly is somewhere that will always be a second home to me and my family. You know, we were a part of something special here. You know, planting roots here in Philly off the field is just as important as what we do on the field. It is our duty as athletes to give back to our communities.
You guys have a lot of players that are just involved, and they're in the community, and they're doing something, and they say things, you guys say things, but you back it up, and that's huge.
Well, yeah, I mean, guys, we got a good locker room, and we got a good head coach, and at the end of the day, winning helps. I mean, winning helps give guys an increased platform to make change. You know, for 8 years in St. Louis, we didn't win a lot of games. Great community, supportive fans, but it's hard to expand outside of that local reach when you're on a 2-14 team or a 1-15 team. And last year I saw that with a lot of guys. Their initiatives were successful because eyes were on us. It's even more incentive to try to win ball games. I mean, it's hard enough to win the NFL, but you know, that just gives you an extra little push.
I'm a white guy in America, you're a white guy in America. And, you know, I felt very fortunate growing up. Like I had my, you know, I had a strong family. You know, I had every opportunity. You know, and I think you probably did too. I've met your family, you know. Why is it so important for you to put your money where your mouth is, but also setting these initiatives up for people in those communities that don't have the opportunities you had?
Apathy is a really dangerous thing in our society and around the world. I think, you know, there's enough evil in the world to go around, and like when you talk about apathy, that's just kind of evil in disguise, in my opinion.
And that, I mean, that brings me to your whole initiative for education equity, right? I mean, there's incredible stats that are scary. You know, when you look at if a child isn't reading at a certain level by the time they're out of elementary school, you know, the chances of incarceration or being on welfare.
Well, I look at education as the efficient answer to change the world in America. You know, our schools are still segregated. Inner cities, schools are really struggling. You know, I grew up with a great school system. I grew up, you know, tutors, private school, all that stuff, and school was still intimidating to me. So I still have nightmares when I wake up and I don't have a project done or I have a quiz coming up. That's how scared I was in school. You talk about, you know, we all need to get along better, these cliches people throw out there. Well, one way to do it is to integrate our schools, which they're not at this point. Diversity in our communities, better resources for kids in underserved communities, and giving kids hope that, you know, school's hard. You got a pro athlete here who went to a private school who's been quote unquote successful. I was scared of school. And, you know, when I talk to kids, I say, you know, you guys are succeeding in spite of a lot of people dropping the ball and not giving you the resources you deserve.
Fans across the country, you look at the Eagles and they sort of, I think they're kind of leading the way with just activism in general.
So this is our second annual clean water dinner here in Philly to see repeat sponsors, repeat fans, attendees, you know, my teammates coming out to meet us. It's cool, man, and Philly, just as passionate as they are about football, they embrace me and kind of like, I almost felt like I had lost that home feeling after I got cut by St. Louis. and I feel like Philly just adopted me as a player.
Cool.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they've adopted my causes too, which is why I really love them. I appreciate that.
So this is where my journey ends. I've traveled from the bustling highways of Los Angeles to the beating streets of Chicago, from home of Super Bowl 53 in Atlanta to America's team in Dallas, and to the frozen tundra of Green Bay. I didn't come into this journey with expectations, really.
I can't do that, man.
I just wanted to listen, to learn, to understand more about America and Americans. The narrative out there is that we're a divided nation, a nation of one side versus another side. And I'm not sure I found that to be the case exactly. I met people with different backgrounds who deal with similar struggles and who are looking for similar solutions. I met people willing to be open, to have that conversation.
It's really about bridging that gap with the law enforcement.
I write what I think needs to be said.
We still dealing with the hardships of being black.
And that was my hope, that if we could just meet, just sit down and talk, like I was able to do several years ago with Colin Kaepernick. And if we listen, we might just find out that we have more in common than we think. I'll walk away knowing this, that there is unity in football. That was pretty much the case everywhere. Yeah, we see it as a game, but it can stand for so much more. So think about that each Sunday as you cheer next to someone who might look different or think differently than you. That if we can come together for something, maybe we can become more indivisible.